A girl sang on the street every evening to pay for her mother's, but when a passing millionaire. The sun was setting over the bustling city streets, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The usual hum of traffic and chatter filled the air, but amidst the noise, a single voice rose above it all, a voice so pure and soulful that it stopped people in their tracks. It belonged to a young girl, no older than 16, standing on the corner of a busy street. Her long dark hair framed her delicate face, and though her clothes were simple and worn, there was a quiet strength about her. She clutched a battered guitar in her hands, her fingers expertly gliding over the strings as she sang a heartfelt melody that seemed to echo the struggles of her life. Her name was Mia. Every evening she stood in that very spot, pouring her heart into her music, not for fame or glory, but for something far more meaningful, to pay for her mother's medical bills. Her mother, once vibrant and full of life, had fallen gravely ill, leaving Mia as the sole provider. It wasn't easy, but Mia refused to give up. She believed her voice was her gift, her way to make a difference, even if it meant standing out in the cold or braving judgmental stares from strangers. People came and went, some tossing coins or small bills into the old, dented hat at her feet. Most didn't linger, caught up in the whirlwind of their own lives. But every so often, someone would stop, captivated by her voice, and for a brief moment, Mia's world and theirs would collide. That evening was no different, at least that's what Mia thought. She closed her eyes as she sang, letting the music carry her away. She didn't notice the man who had stopped a few steps behind the growing crowd. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had an air of quiet authority. His name was Lucas Harrington, a self-made millionaire known for his sharp business acumen and an unshakable belief in hard work. Lucas had been on his way to an upscale dinner when he heard her voice. It was raw, unpolished, but undeniably powerful. There was something about it, something that tugged at a part of him he thought he had buried long ago. He stood there watching her, his expensive leather shoes planted firmly on the gritty sidewalk, completely unaware of the curious glances from passers-by who recognized him. As Mia finished her song, the crowd erupted into polite applause, and she offered a shy smile, thanking them softly. Lucas didn't move. He continued to observe her as she bent down to collect the few bills and coins scattered in her hat. Her hands trembled slightly, whether from the cold or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. For a moment, Lucas hesitated. He had spent years building walls around himself, shielding his heart from the vulnerabilities of the world. But something about this girl, her determination, her courage, her unwavering love for her mother, chipped away at those walls. Mia packed up her guitar, her eyes scanning the crowd briefly before she prepared to head home. That's when Lucas finally stepped forward. "Wait," he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Mia turned, startled. She looked up at him, her wide brown eyes meeting his piercing gaze. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "You have a remarkable talent," he said, handing it to her. Mia stared at the bill, then at him, unsure if she should accept it. I can't take that," she stammered. But Lucas simply smiled. "Consider it an investment. You'll do great things someday." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Mia stood there, the bill clutched tightly in her hand, her mind racing. Who was he? And why did his words feel like more than just kindness? Little did Mia know, that brief encounter would change her life forever. Lucas Harrington wasn't just a man with deep pockets. He was a man with a plan. And while Mia returned home that night, her heart filled with a glimmer of hope. Lucas was already making phone calls, setting something in motion that would shake the foundation of her world. But what was he planning? And why was he so moved by a simple street performance? The answers lay ahead, in a journey neither of them could have anticipated, a journey of second chances, unspoken dreams, and the extraordinary power of believing in someone else. That night, Mia sat at the small, rickety kitchen table in their tiny apartment. The $100 bill lay in front of her, the edges smoothed out from where she clutched it tightly on the way home. Her mother, pale and frail, rested on the worn couch nearby, her chest rising and falling slowly as she slept. The dim light of the single bowl above them flickered slightly, adding to the stillness of the room. Mia's mind was swirling. Who was that man? Why had he been so generous? And why did his words feel like a promise, like they carried some kind of weight? She thought about how he had looked at her, not with pity, like some people did, but with something else. Respect, belief, whatever it was, it had stirred something in her. She sighed, folding the bill carefully and tucking it into a small jar she kept hidden in the kitchen cabinet. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy her mother's medication for another week. Mia knew she couldn't afford to get caught up in the mystery of that stranger. She had bigger concerns. The mounting bills, the doctor's warnings, the endless pressure of being both daughter and caregiver. It was a heavy burden for a girl her age. The next day, Mia returned to her usual spot on the street corner. Her voice was a little stronger, her heart a little lighter as she sang her songs. She noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd, people who had passed by her before, some who always dropped a coin or two, and others who stayed just long enough to listen. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the street, but saw nothing unusual. What she didn't know was that Lucas Harrington had sent someone to keep an eye on her. After their brief encounter, he couldn't stop thinking about her voice, her determination, and the quiet resilience she carried. It reminded him of his own mother, who had worked tirelessly to give him a better life. Lucas wasn't a man who believed in coincidences, and something about Mia felt like fate. He wanted to help her, but he also wanted to understand her first. For the next week, Lucas's assistant, a sharp and kind woman named Evelyn, observed Mia from a distance. She watched as Mia sang her heart out, packed up her guitar at the end of the evening, and walked home alone. Evelyn noticed the way Mia's hands trembled when she counted her earnings, the way her shoulders sagged with exhaustion, and the flicker of hope in her eyes when someone complimented her talent. Evelyn reported everything back to Lucas, and each detail only strengthened his resolve. Lucas decided it was time to act. He called in a favor from an old friend who owned a prestigious music academy. Together, they came up with a plan to give Mia an opportunity she never could have dreamed of, a full scholarship to the academy, complete with housing and healthcare support for her mother. But there was one condition. Mia had to prove herself in an audition. Meanwhile, Mia's life continued as it always had, until the day Evelyn approached her. It was a chilly afternoon, and Mia was setting up her guitar when a woman in a tailored coat stopped in front of her. "Are you Maya?" Evelyn asked, her voice warm but professional. Mia hesitated, clutching her guitar strap. "Yes, why?" Evelyn smiled. "I work with Lucas Harrington. He was deeply moved by your performance last week, and he wants to offer you an incredible opportunity." Mia blinked, her mind struggling to process the words. "Lucas Harrington, the man who gave me that $100 bill. That's him," Evelyn confirmed. "He believes in your talent and wants to help you take it to the next level. He's arranged for you to audition at one of the top music academies in the city. If you're accepted, everything, your tuition, your living expenses, your mother's care will be covered." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "Why would he do that for me?" "Because he sees something in you," Evelyn replied, "and because he knows what it's like to need a chance." For the first time in her life, Mia felt like the universe was giving her a break. But as the initial shock wore off, doubt crept in. She had never performed in front of professionals before. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? The days leading up to the audition were a whirlwind of preparation and nerves. Maya practiced every chance she got, her fingers aching from hours of strumming her guitar. Her mother, though weak, encouraged her with quiet words of support. "You have a gift, Mia," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be afraid to share it." The day of the audition arrived, and Mia stood backstage, clutching her guitar with trembling hands. The auditorium was grand and intimidating, with rows of velvet chairs and a panel of judges seated at a long table. Lucas was there too, sitting discreetly in the back, his expression unreadable. As Mia stepped onto the stage, the weight of everything she had been through pressed down on her. But then she looked out into the audience, and her eyes found Lucas's. He gave her a small nod. And in that moment, she felt a surge of confidence. She took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice filled the room, raw and emotional, carrying the story of her struggles and dreams. The judges leaned forward, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine awe. Lucas watched, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. When Mia finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting into applause. She stood there, her chest heaving, as the reality of what she had just done began to sink in. But as she walked off the stage, a thought lingered in her mind. Had she done enough? Would this be the turning point she so desperately needed, or just another step in a long, uncertain journey? The answers were just ahead, waiting to unfold in ways Maya never could have imagined. Mia sat in the quiet backstage lounge, her heart still racing from the performance. The applause had been overwhelming, but now that it was over, doubt began to creep in again. She replayed every note, every word she'd sung, wondering if it had been enough to earn the chance of a lifetime. A soft knock at the door startled her. She looked up to see Evelyn standing there, her face calm but unreadable. "They're deliberating now," Evelyn said gently, stepping inside. "No matter what happens, you should be proud of yourself, Mia. You gave it everything." Mia nodded, clutching her guitar tightly. She appreciated Evelyn's words, but it was hard to quiet the storm inside her. Every moment stretched into an eternity, and by the time Evelyn returned to escort her back into the auditorium, Mia felt like her legs might give out beneath her. The judges were seated at the long table, their expressions serious but not unkind. Lucas stood in the back, watching quietly, his hands clasped in front of him. One of the judges, a woman with sharp eyes but a kind smile, leaned forward. "Mia," she began, her voice steady, "we've made our decision. And we want to say first that your performance was deeply moving. Your voice has a raw, emotional quality that's rare. It's clear you've poured your heart into your music." Mia's breath caught in her throat as she waited for the verdict. "We're thrilled to offer you a spot at the Academy," the judge said, her smile widening. Mia's hands flew to her mouth, and tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The crowd of emotions, relief, gratitude, disbelief, washed over her all at once. The judges continued, explaining the terms of her scholarship and the support they would provide for her mother's care. But Mia barely heard them. All she could think about was how this moment, this chance, could change everything. After the formalities were done, Lucas approached her as the room began to clear. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You earned this." Mia looked up at him, her voice trembling. "I don't even know how to thank you. I wouldn't be here without you." Lucas shook his head. "This was all you, Mia. I just gave you a nudge. The rest was your talent, your perseverance, and your heart. Don't ever forget that." Over the next few weeks, Mia's life transformed. She moved into the Academy's housing and began her training under some of the best instructors in the industry. Her days were filled with music, and though the work was demanding, she embraced every challenge with the same determination that had brought her here. Her mother's condition improved too, thanks to the care Lucas had arranged. Knowing her mother was safe and comfortable allowed Mia to focus fully on her dreams. As the months passed, Mia's confidence grew, and so did her talent. She began performing in recitals and small concerts, her voice reaching audiences far beyond the street corner where she had started. People were drawn to her not just for her music, but for her story, a story of resilience, love, and the extraordinary power of a single act of kindness. One evening, after a particularly emotional performance, Mia found Lucas in the crowd. She made her way to him, her heart full. "You were right," she said softly. "This was my chance to do something great. Thank you for believing in me." Lucas smiled, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and something deeper, a quiet understanding of what it meant to take a leap of faith. "You've earned every bit of this, Mia. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," she said. "When the time comes, when you see someone else standing where you once stood, don't hesitate to pay it forward." Mia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew she would carry his words with her for the rest of her life. As she walked away, the stage lights casting a warm glow around her, Mia felt something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. Her music was no longer just a way to survive. It was a way to thrive, to inspire, and to honor the journey that had brought her here. And as she stepped back onto the stage, her voice rising once more to fill the room, it was clear to everyone who heard her that this was only the beginning of her story.